Today's episode is sponsored by chickens. For the past few months, hordes of chickens have been coming to my apartment and sacrificing one of their own as if I were some kind of god. I've been consisting solely off of sacrificed chicken meat for what has felt like a millennia. And you can too. Go to www.chickens. Go to www.chickens.com/panda and you will receive a 15% discount on sacrificial chickens monthly. Also, there is a Patreon you can donate to, and for a single dollar, you get access to the Young Panda Discord. On with the content you paid to hear! Mobile Suit Gundam is a 1979 series from Japan. It's anime. It's a mecha. It might be considered the granddaddy mecha series if you don't count other weird black and white super robot types. Now, I'm a firm believer in America's role as world police. But Japan certainly has the market cornered in dope-ass animated cartoons for grown-ups that are about being entertaining and having fun and doing cool shit and occasionally saying something super deep and interesting and makes you want to think about how the world works and how my mind works and how I feel about things. In America, we have the market down on explosions. Well, honestly, India's kind of been fucking us up on that regard. But we've got the market cornered on the market, making all of the money in the world. That's the way we like to run things here. But probably in the recent couple of months, maybe the past year, my interest has solely moved towards Japan. Like, I've been watching so much anime recently. And, like, not just anything. There's a lot of crap. For every good anime, there's like 15 absolute garbage fires. But the few that are good really intrigue me. And this, I guess I've taken a back seat to my critical type personality, where I look at everything through an analytical and critical lens. And nothing has ever gotten me to be able to do that. Every series or like long form story, anything you have to like engage a whole bunch of time to, any franchise, it always ends up with me just having a serious issue with it and then quitting halfway through. Like I put like 8 hours into a franchise and then I'm like, okay, that's enough. I get it. It's not as good over time. Unless it's like a show that's got really good, like Breaking Bad, that's like 60 hours of goodness, but it's all one cohesive story. Things don't really change. A franchise is a little different, where you're going to have multiple people coming in and trying to continue a type of universe and feel, and keep it at the same quality level. And because of that, you're going to have things be varying in an incredible sense of the word, very different. Unlike anything that originally made. Look at Star Wars. It's been so much reduced down to canonically being just a handful of movies. But before that, it was this insane canon of hundreds and hundreds of fan-made books and a lot of things considered to be actual canon. Video games and, a lot of stuff that is a million times more interesting. But I can guarantee you, like, the Disney movies have their faults. Like, I don't like them for the most part. I really dislike what Star Wars has become, and it makes me pretty upset now whenever I see it or hear about it. But in terms of quality, the new movies certainly have a level of quality that I'm sure that most of the dollar store book series might have missed. I don't want to speak out of my ass here, but I think it's not a hard arguable fact that they're probably trash. Because that's the nature of a large fandom where anyone can write anything and it's technically considered a part of it. So I've never really considered myself a part of any fandom. I would say the most hardcore fandom I'd ever been a part of was the Breaking Bad fandom. But in America, typically, once a franchise stops giving you those monetary returns back, you just drop it and forget about it. Like, there's a lot of horror franchises that once the money really stops coming in, they just drop it. Like Nightmare on Elm Street. They weren't really interested in creating a cohesive world or like a universe with that. They just wanted to make another movie that we can make super cheap and polish it just enough and so that it's a movie, and then we can make bank off of the people that are actually interested in seeing another Nightmare on Elm Street movie, or just teenagers trying to spook their girlfriends before trying to like hold them. You know what I mean? You take a girl to the movie theater, see a scary movie, and then she's like, "Ah!" and you hold her and you kiss her forehead and say, "Honey, it's fine. It's fine. It's just a movie." And she's like, "No!" Ah! And you grab, shut the fuck up, please, God, there's people here, you're embarrassing me. And she's like, oh no, no, it's gonna kill me. And you're like, oh my God, what is the matter with you? So studios typically try to make movies for that crowd, which aren't typically the most critical thinkers, and they're definitely not interested in long-term world building and all of the intricacies that come with building a cohesive world. And I think I've always been like a little repulsed by things with expansive world building, because I've always been interested in the quality of storytelling in a single narrative experience. And once you start bringing in world building, it becomes so important that it begins to break down what makes a standalone movie good, which is an interesting character that goes through a journey and changes on the inside and overcomes whatever specific set of problems which are geared towards him growing in order to solve them. And once you start tacking on additional sequels, you get stuff like Monsters University, where there's no real reason for them to be monsters. It's just a continuation of the characters and the appeals, quote unquote, the appeals of what people want to see from each franchise. And that's why I think in America, maybe not just in America, but specifically here, we do get franchises that really begin to peter out and no longer interest the person who's looking for quality. What studios and the people who control our media in this country miss out on is how to make world building fascinating. Make it so interesting that you don't mind as much if character and plot are given a back seat, because you want to see how this world continues to develop. And I don't think I really cared or understood that until I started watching Gundam. Gundam is the biggest mess of a franchise you've ever seen in your life. There's like 10 different timelines and just a mess of canon and non-canon and gray canon, and they really say not to even care about what is canonically technical and just kind of get into it. And I think I have finally come around to actually becoming a fanboy for a franchise, and that's for me personally, that's actually kind of crazy. But I think Gundam totally did it. I watched Gundam The Origin first, and I could follow what was going on, but it was clear that I wasn't in the club, and it was definitely appealing towards a specific club of human beings that are already fans of Gundam and already know what the fuck's going on. And when you see Ramba Ral kick down a door, you're like, oh shit, dude, Ramba Ral. And I'm like, guy, it's a guy, go guy. But despite not actually understanding everything about it, it was definitely a good entry point. But I really wish I could have just taken the advice of Gundam fans, because I don't do anything in this life without doing an insane amount of research to see if it's a good idea. I'm such an anxious person that with the potential for wasted time and negative outcomes is there. If the potential is there, I have to stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning for a week straight, Googling the word Gundam timeline before I can start watching the rest of the show. Just because, what if I don't like it and I waste the time I put into it? So I started Googling it, and everyone says you gotta watch it from the beginning. You have to watch it from the original and then move your way forward. And I was like, whatever, I'm not gonna do that. I don't care. So, but I guess I'll watch it in the timeline of the main timeline in Gundam, which is the Universal Century timeline. And I decided to just watch it with what happens chronologically in universe, not our chronological timeline starting from 1979, which is what everyone else says. So I started doing that, and I watched the Mobile Suit Gundam show, and it is so fucking cool. It is such a cool ass little thing. The animation is bad, but like it's got that 70s charm to it. Like if you watch old anything, there's a certain charm that comes with not having the resources and technology. There's a certain well, fuck it, we gotta put something. So then they have I love this thing that it always happens in the first 3 series. They'll have a guy who's in a Gundam or in a ship or something, and he's talking and the window is right behind him, or the camera or the screen or whatever, and it's moving because the vehicle's moving and it keeps it intense. But sometimes they don't have enough of that that background graphic, because it's just a moving rectangle. And then they run out, and then the dialogue hasn't ended, so they just take it from the beginning of that graphic again, and it just kind of plays in a loop behind the person talking. And there's something about that, if you're an animation purist, you're gonna be like, oh, this is sloppy, this is terrible, they shouldn't have done this. But I'm not. I think it's kind of adorable. It was just they were like, we want to make this dope, crazy, fucking deep, sad, epic anime fight show, but we've only got a certain amount of time, we've only got a certain amount of people, we've only got a certain amount of money to pay them. I love how do we cut the corners in order to still make it epic and engaging? And I love seeing that decision making at work. Maybe it's just because I'm a production type person. I can't draw, I don't do animation, but I've made videos, and when I see those mistakes, it's I see that people are putting the fun first, which is something that is really missing in a lot of entertainment, is putting fun above your perfectionism. And I just think it stands, when I see that, I see someone trying to create an engaging piece of media, not necessarily trying to prove that they are a great video or animation person. So I always love that. That's why I love bad movies. But Mobile Suit Gundam is not a bad show. It's a very good show with limitations because of time. For the same reason, one of my favorite movies is The Day the Earth Stood Still. Because it's got a lot of dated special effects, but they had a message, and they wanted to get to that message, and they were like, fuck it, we'll have a goofy-looking robot. I don't care. And it's just cool. So you see how much work they put into specific parts and all the corners they had to cut, and that has a certain charm. And that all of that definitely outweighs the jankiness of the animation being off-putting. And so for that reason, I really recommend just taking it for what it's trying to do versus judging it as per your current animation standards. I don't know if you're a big anime fan. I don't know who you are. This message could be being listened to by an endless number of people, different people with different experiences. I would assume that if you clicked on something that said Gundam on it, you might have an interest in Gundam. So I'm going to assume that you're a Gundam fan, or at least an anime fan who's interested in Gundam. In which case, I don't even know who the fuck I'm talking for. You're probably aware of Mobile Suit Gundam. But anyways, the show's about Amuro, Amuro. I love when people in videos pronounce shit wrong to a fan, and you're like, "Ugh! Ooh, he called it the V Gundam." So anyways, Amuro Ray is this kid who's living on this colony. I mean, you can't even start with the characters in this, because the world is really what's the most fascinating thing. Well, anyways, the human race has expanded its technological advancements to the point of traveling out into the stars and making colonies. And their colonies are these really fascinating tubes. Like, you live inside of a tube, and the tube is all land. And while you're in there, gravity's a little lighter, I think. It's constantly spinning, so it's almost as if it's using like centrifugal force to keep you down to the ground. And basically, once we get out and we start building all these different colonies, and they're all in the orbit of the Earth. That's the cool thing too. Is like, it's like a space exploration show, but we never go farther than like the moon. You know, I think as you go on, like you can see Mars, and by the time you're at the UC 129, for the Crossbone Gundam fans out there, you got Jupiter involved, but like, we don't really make it past the asteroid belt in this show. For the most part, it's within driving distance of Earth. You're by the moon. It's in the direct orbit. And already, once we get to the colonies, there's factions and tribalism and war. So that's the coolest thing about it, is it's basically a war drama, but with mobile suits instead of tanks. Everyone gets a Gundam and fights instead of everyone getting in tanks. And you could, if you're a more technologically minded person, it might annoy you because they don't get into how the Gundam works. And the stuff they do say, the thing I like is this: if they say something, it makes sense. If they know it wouldn't make sense, they don't talk about it. And they just would, if it doesn't make sense, they just say Minovsky particles. That's their one. That's their one catch-all technobabble term that just completely encapsulates everything that is to be misunderstood. That or new type magic. So new types. Well, that's the perfect transition into new types. Once people start having their wars in space, certain people begin to have incredible abilities that they don't really know where they come from, but they assume it comes from just a human being living and existing in a completely different environment. It means that we're going to adapt to the new circumstances. And once you do that, you become a more sensitive, prescient, you can kind of, you can understand things just by looking at them. At one point, someone says, you feel the entire battlefield, and it becomes associated with pilots and the pilots of Gundams, clearly. So you've got this whole world set up where everyone's in space, people are changing, and then you bring in war, because it almost seems like war is inevitable in that context of new nations being created. The colonies begin, one colony in particular, one side, creates Zeon. Zeon is this militaristic republic that wants independence from the Earth Federation, and they're going to fight for it. And there's a lot of different stuff with Zeon in it, and Zeon is always the bad guy, but on principle, I get it. I get what Zeon's talking about, especially in later stuff like Unicorn. You really get a sense like, oh man, I'd be kind of pissed too. I get it. I probably, if I was in your shoes, I might do something similar. And that's definitely what makes the writing really good in a lot of the series, not all of them. Things aren't presented as black and white, good and evil. Things are somewhat presented in a way that you're a little unsure of who's the good guy, and maybe we're all the bad guy here, and we're just people fighting in war, and it's just a stupid, terrible thing that ends in suffering and the death of millions, but it almost feels unavoidable. And you really have to have that balance of ideologies where we might have a protagonist and an antagonist, but you can't just have vicious bad guys if you actually want to make a statement about war itself. Because if you have a bad guy, like later in the Gundam series, like when you get to Victory Gundam, the bad guys are so bad. Like in F91, they want to kill everyone. That's the goal of the bad guys. They want to wipe out as many human beings as possible. So then it can't be a conversation about if war is justified, because then yes, of course that war is justified, because you have to stop them from killing everybody. And it makes it difficult to make that a statement about why war itself is bad. No, that guy's kind of an asshole. That group kind of sucks. Gundam is very often said it has a strong anti-war message, but I don't know if I can even agree with that. Anti-war is sort of if you want to do something anti-war, you make it gut-wrenching and terrible, like Saving Private Ryan or Apocalypse Now. That's anti-war. Gundam is not pro-war, but it's just like observant of people. People are naturally going to fight, and even if you take shitloads of people and put them in space and put them in different colonies, the colonies will fight. It's sort of human nature. It's a terrible, shitty part of human nature, but it's going to happen. And we should fight against it when it happens, and you should do everything you can to stop it. So I guess it is anti-war. It's just more just anti-war enough to keep a 40-year franchise going about dope-ass anime robot fights. And that, oh man, I'm transitioning the shit out of this one. The dope-ass anime robot fights are the coolest thing, man. I mean, it's very sensationalist and simplistic, and there's not much to talk about besides its cool fight scenes with giant robots. But there's always a deeper level to every single anime robot fight. It's not just spectacle. I mean, there's some stuff that's just spectacle or just to have a fight, but so much of it is like very motivated, and you understand the people that are within the Gundams and why they're fighting. There's some really great stuff in there, and like there's this weird thing that you kind of have to catch on to is like in every Gundam they have some type of microphone that can send out what you're saying to the different Gundams, so they'll just be like talking to each other while fighting in space, and they never really address how that works, or I wasn't paying attention enough when they did. And so it's very personal. Every fight is very personal. It's about two different people, typically with two different ideologies, or the same ideology, just in different points of the universe, and they usually can come to some kind of understanding with each other, but they're put into circumstances where they have to fight. And I just think it's beautiful. It's weird. It's interesting though. You want to see how everything pans out. Even though it's another one. It's another fucking Gundam fight. Every single episode has at least one Gundam fight. And you'll certainly be tired. You'll be quite tired of seeing it. I mean, sometimes I can burn myself out. I've been trying to binge watch these shows, so I watch like 10 episodes a day, and I can definitely burn myself out on Gundams, but I'm trying to get through it all because the overarching waves of things happening in the franchise as a whole is also a big part of the fascination. It's not just the rise and drama of the one series. I think this taught me a lot about fandom. Like, it's not what's going to happen here. It's not what's going to happen in this context. It's not just what's going to happen to these characters, to these people. That's what keeps you moving along. That's the batter and pitcher going at it for a while that keeps you watching. But there's this huge overarching narrative development, and it's not even. I mean, I'm sure there's other shows. I think One Piece is sort of regarded as the show that starts with people and becomes about the world, and because it's one narrative, it stays cohesive and grows. But Gundam is so many different timelines and so many different canons and non-canons, but it's engrossing in a way that after you spend enough time with it, you just need to see where it goes. In a very real way, it's like Stockholm Syndrome. I feel like I'm kidnapped by my Gundam obsession right now, and this is a cry for help. I think that it's a franchise that I definitely want to keep getting into. I'm going to list off everything now that I've seen. I saw the Origin. I saw 0079, which is the first show. Gundam Zeta, Gundam Double Zeta, the 08MS team, Stardust Memory. What was the other? What was the War in the Pocket? And I also watched I've been watching a bit of Mobile Fighter G Gundam. I've also seen F91 and some of Victory Gundam and Char's Counterattack, obviously. Obviously. And I might talk about those in particular and what I liked about them specifically, but Unicorn. I watched Unicorn, and really, really quickly, I want to talk about Unicorn and how much I realized I fucked up. Because I started watching them in order of Universal Century. I must admit, I broke my own rule because everyone was saying skip Double Zeta, which is the sequel to Zeta, which is the sequel to the first one, the third series. They said skip Double Zeta, it's not good. And I was like, well, I really want to get to fucking Unicorn because it looks dope. What I've seen is dope. That big ass one in Tokyo, that big Unicorn 1-to-1 scale Gunpla. We'll talk about Gunpla maybe later. But it's super dope, and I wanted to watch it, so I skipped Double Zeta, and I knew there was stuff I didn't understand going on in Unicorn because I skipped it, and I felt like I committed a crime. I felt like I was a part of something wrong. I felt like I wasn't doing my due diligence as a Gundam fan by watching everything before I saw something that was so celebratory of the series as a whole, and it sort of, it's still good, it just kind of soured the experience a little bit. So that's when I decided, like, I respect this series. I really kind of love it. I have a connection to it now. And I've built 3 Gunpla. Just little kits, little Gundam kits. And I got 3 Gundams sitting on my movie shelf, and I've got one in the mail coming to get built. And now I have atoned for my ways, and I'm following the advice of the people that are also Gundam fans when I was looking at researching how to watch Gundam. And if you're interested in watching Gundam, man, start from the beginning. Start from that very first episode of that very first series. It's a little janky, but that's part of it. And I think it's totally worth it. Just get through. I think the biggest hump to get through is like there's a 10 episode or like 20 episode stretch in the first series where they're on Earth, and you can tell it's not as motivated as everything else. It becomes, I think the term is villain of the week, where it's just a new guy to fight, and they're just kind of like they're just going through the desert and then fighting a guy, desert fighting a guy, desert fighting a guy. But once you get through that, the franchise becomes really, really interesting. And don't listen to what fucking anybody says about Double Zeta, because I like it. I like it just as much, if not a little bit more, than Zeta Gundam, and that is sacrilege. I'm afraid to say it on the Gundam Discords because I don't want people get mad at me, but I like it more. It's sillier, but it's fun. I don't know who I'm talking to or who this is for, but I just really want to say, if you're interested in watching Gundam, if you're new to the Gundam series, just watch it from the beginning, watch it all. If you're a researcher like me, do as little as possible, because I swear to God, I spoiled like 5 different deaths because I forgot, because like a character is mentioned, and I'm like, wait, who the fuck is that character? There's like 40 characters in this show. I'll Google it, and then I'll scroll down to where we are, and then it'll be like, after dying in the Great Zeon War. I was like, fuck, damn it. God damn it. So, check it out, man. Check out Gundam. Gundam's cool. But if you're not the type of person that's going to dive in and become an obsessive Gundam fan, if you're not interested in that at all, tune in next week for some other bullshit I'm obsessed with. Thank you. Have a nice day. So, as mentioned in the beginning, there's a Patreon that you can go and donate to and support this channel and me financially, and that'd be so wonderful. And there's tiers and whatnot. I forgot. There's some tiers, and one of the tiers is you get your name mentioned if you pay over like $5 or something. So here's a shout out to Milkman Fantasy. He is the very first patron. I love you. And a while back, I wrote him a poem, and he pays over the $10 mark. So I am now going to do, as promised, something he didn't agree to or even ask for. I'm going to do a dramatic reading of the poem I wrote him like 6 months ago. I sat upon my work computer chair, trotting through daily job affair. Sadness in my heart, hope was torn apart, not expecting anyone to care. Bored, I log into my account, though expecting no amount. Imagine my surprise to see my doubts were lies. A benevolent hero has finally come around. Milkman Fantasy is his name, brings all other men to shame. As giving as Jesus, likely has a big penis. A godman, a hero, I proclaim.